Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. The World Series is over and the Hot Stove League has begun. With me today to throw some coals on what should be an unusually warm stove is Leon Wurth, scout for the Milwaukee Brewers, native of St. John, St. Mary High School graduate. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Barry. Good to see you again.
Good for you to be back. This is going to be interesting. And let me also say before we begin that what we talk about today may be dated by the time this program comes out because things are moving fast. Let's go to the World Series. Colorado Rockies, very hot team, just mowed down the opposition. Red Sox have to come from a 3-1 deficit to win the American League Championship over the Indians. Then all of a sudden they get hot and surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me. I think if you look at last year's World Series when the Tigers had the long layoff, if anything, I think most baseball people thought the Tigers were a much better team than the Cardinals. And I can't say that about Boston and Colorado. I think Boston, arguably, if you look at them from the whole season, you could argue they were the best team. And I had no problem with that. But I do think the Rockies, I talked to a lot of baseball people, and they've never seen a team finish as hot and as strong as the Rockies. And you just kind of had to, I don't know, they have 8 days off. What do? You scrimmage, you whatever. You lose a little bit. And I think that's what happened with Detroit last year. You say, well, we'd like to have rest in a couple of days, get your pitching staff, but when you get a week,
too much.
It's too much. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it, but Boston may have beat them no matter what. They're a good ball club, and they're strong in every category. I would have liked to have seen the Rockies be as hot as they were and make it a good series. But to me, it was a pretty boring World Series.
Well, and you look at the Red Sox back to the wall in 2004, came from a 3-zip deficit, never happened before, 3-1. And the Indians look pretty hot too.
Yeah, the Indians. It looked like a Colorado-Cleveland World Series, which had the TV people cringing on who was
not major markets.
Not major markets. So they, you have a Boston credit. They've got a group of some hard-nosed guys, and they play. Their 04 team and 07 team. That's what they're marked by. The Euclides and the hard-nosed guys. Mm-hmm. They've got some guys that they hang in there, and they're gritty. So I got to give them credit. I think they're a pretty good ball club.
Your ball club did pretty well this year. Good building block for the future. What do the Brewers look like?
Well, I guess that's the best spin on it. It's awful hard when you start 24-10 and have an 8 or 9 game lead, and then it slips away from you. It leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. But I would think in the general view of things, as the first winning season Milwaukee's had in 15 years, and a nice young nucleus, yes, you'd think, okay, for the future. But baseball being baseball, you hate to have a chance to get in the playoffs. You don't know what the future's going to hold. But to put the good spin on it, yes, we had a winning record, and so we've been there. This group that's come in for 5 years, we've had a 500 season and that. So, our hopes are high, and it's going to be an interesting off season for us. We've got a lot of issues going on, guys coming and going, so it will be. It's going to be a very interesting off season.
Speaking of the off season, you're a professional scout. What do you do in the off season?
Well, I just got back from Arizona.
The fall.
There was the top AA, AAA guys play in an Arizona Fall League, and it goes on for about 6 weeks. And really good duty, by the way. I asked for. In lieu of last year in November, I went to Venezuela, which was quite a treat, an experience. Not going this year, and went to Puerto Rico in February for the Caribbean World Series. But in between that, it's a little bit like a school teacher. You have 9 months on, 3 off, more or less. So when I work, it's intense. There's no, I don't get weekends off. It's pretty much 7 days a week, from spring training until about now. There's a few in between, but I probably average 6.5 days a week once it starts, because there's games every day, and there's minor league, major league things I see. So it's a very It's an intense 9 months.
Mhm.
So, and in the off season, I may or may not go to. Usually have some kind of off season duty. Arizona being one of them, and some Latin American countries, some, but not this year so far.
Before you went with the Brewers, you were an amateur scout with the Yankees, signed a fellow named Jorge Posada. I'm sure you still have contacts, interest with the Yankees. That is possibly going to be the, I guess, headline-grabbingest aspect of the Hot Stove League. And again, what we say today may be totally dated. New manager in New York, Joe Girardi, who I believe you told me would have been your pick had you been the Yankee brass. Any idea how all this is going to play out in New York?
Well, going back to Girardi being my pick, that was after we had talked, and you said after Torrey left. I'm not.
You're right, exactly, right. Sure.
I got no problems with Torrey, and
did the Yankees do him dirty, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say if you offer a guy $5 million that you did him dirty, but in lieu of it was a cut, and I think he signed it with the 3-year deal. I think Torrey would have liked for them to have said, okay, here's a 2-year deal with a third option, and you're going to be a lifetime Yankee. You're going to be in the front office or something like that. I think he felt slighted. So in that respect, probably yeah. Now, if you break it down and look and say, gee, how can you offer a guy, and the next closest manager is LaRusse at 2.8. Here's Joe making 7.5 for the last few years. They haven't been in the World Series. They haven't. So you can understand both sides. And so I'm not sure what side I'd come down on it, to be honest with you. It's hard for me to, you're not there in the circumstances. I think Torrey felt like he was slighted. Probably he was, if you read the papers, and as long in the relationship that he's had with the Yankees, and it was kind of a, okay, here it is, kind of deal. And I think he was like, I don't need that kind of pressure, don't want it. Knew that he could probably get some kind of deal with the Dodgers. People would be knocking at the door. And I don't think he liked working on the 1-year deal. So I think that was a little, I think he took that. And I can't say I blame him there. He spent a lot of time and done a fine job with the Yankees. I don't know.
Some of the sports writers had predicted earlier that the Yankees would make him a deal they knew he would refuse, so they could force him out.
Yeah, I read that too, and that may be true. But back to your question about Posada, he came up as Girardi's understudy. They have a history, and so I think that would bode well for the Yankees as far as re-signing him. Letting Torrey get away, I thought might have cost the Yankees more money if Rivera and Posada, all those guys are huge Torrey fans. And, if Torrey came back, I would have been shocked if Rivera, Posada, and maybe even A-Rod, if that's what the Yankees are looking for, that they would have come back because they're comfortable with Torrey. Rivera and Posada have been Yankees their whole life. I would be shocked if they didn't want to finish their careers, and probably this last contract will be close to their last one. So I still think they would lean toward it, and the Yankees may, I don't think they know that they're going to come back, because most guys will test the waters just to be sure. Now they can go back and negotiate with the Yankees and say, well, here, this team's offering me this or that. So I don't really know. I would think the Yankees still have the inside track on Posada and Rivera as far as re-signing, just because they haven't played anywhere else, and I think so many guys don't do it and that play for one team, and both these guys are potential Hall of Famers or will get some consideration, and I think it would be nice. They would feel good about being a Yankee their whole career. But money. Agents and money, who knows today?
Speaking of that, of course, then there's Alex Rodriguez, who wants to test the waters.
Right.
Your feeling on that?
Well, I think that's more agent-based. His agent has history.
Scott Boras.
Scott Boras has a history of, he doesn't, he will say there will be no hometown discounts. He will, I follow the Braves a lot, and Andrew Jones is also a client of his, and he's played. And, they've negotiated with him the last 2 years, I think. And, And he's pretty much said there would be no hometown discount just because he played for this team his whole life. We're not going to give you a break. We're going to get as much as we can from anybody that will pay. So he does mercenary work, and he gets his players money, and teams pay, so you can take that any way you want it.
Well, you know, kind of the opposite of that is Andy Pettitte, who has announced, at least as of today, that he'll either come back with the Yankees or he won't come back with anybody, that there's this sense of loyalty. And you know, when we were growing up, ball players played for the same team forever, except maybe in the twilight of their career, they'd go here 2 or 3 years, but they're identified with one particular team. You just don't see much of that anymore. It's hard to keep up with these guys, that they go here, they go there. That's a pretty fundamental shift in baseball, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think it's money based. I think it's the free agent thing, and you know, the club won't, and that's why the Yankees and a lot of the teams that pay the big money, guy says, well, I can't turn it down. I'd like to stay here, but I get twice as much money going somewhere else. They go. Mm-hmm. So it can't protect. It's the system, I think. I don't know that all the time I can blame the player, but I think at some point with the millions you make and the taxes that you're going to get taxed with, you know, if it's a matter of 10 million or 8.5, and you're an agent, and what happens, the agent will say, because all arbitration, which is what happens, arbitration is based upon what the guy at your position makes. So the agent will come to the player, and the players' union will put pressure on the player to leave and take the higher money because it raises the average. So now he says, well, you're messing over the other guys at your position when they come to arbitration, because they will say, well, see, catchers get this much, that hit this much. So the agents force these guys and make them, the players' union really encourages these guys to not take the hometown discount or even stay where you are comfortable. They'll say, take the biggest money you get because it raises the average. So now when you go to arbitration and the arbitrators look, they go, well, let's see, second basemen are making this much. So that's the game they play. Unless you got a real strong individual that feels real strongly about staying with his team and tell the union, no, sorry, I'm staying here. I'm going to take 8.5 and be real happy because I won't be able to spend the extra 1.5 anyway because I've already got 50 million in the bank.
A-Rod is expecting to get, well, Boras is expecting him to get this astronomical amount of money, even more than the Yankees were offered. Do you think he'll get it?
I don't know who will pay. I really don't. I mean, the Yankees are right up there. I don't know what Boston, you know, Boston paid Dice K that big sum, and they're really, you know, I don't know where the payroll stops. There's only a few teams that can pay it. You know, the Dodgers. I would say.
You mentioned Boston. There's not exactly amicable feelings, I guess, toward Rodriguez in Boston now. You know, the fist fight with Veritek and all that stuff. Would that have any effect on Boston, whether they went after him or not? Given the fact he's obviously a highly talented ball player, very good baseball player, but would that maybe make Boston hesitant? They don't want to mess with the chemistry of this team?
I think it's a fair question. I really hadn't thought about it, kind of forgotten about the A-Rod Veritek thing. I would, off the top of my head, I'd say no. I think if they think he can win them another World Series.
Well, the reason I also brought it up is after the series was over, and of course A-Rod's timing was interesting when he announces in the middle of the World Series, Game 4. He was chastised considerably for trying to upstage the World Series. But, of course, Mike Lowell, their third baseman, he's up for free agency. And the fans were chanting, you know, Lowell stay, A-Rod go away, or something like that. Do owners listen to fans and how they feel about this stuff?
I would say Boston, Boston fans are. There was a great article in USA Today about the Boston Nation replacing Yankee Nation as the #1 nation. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting about, and I can attest to this by trying to get hotel rooms when I go to a big league town. If Boston comes in, you don't go because the fans have bought them out. I mean, it's cheaper for them to drive to Baltimore, because Baltimore you can get a ticket and get a hotel and buy a ticket than it would be to buy a scalper's ticket at home in Boston. Yes. So that's true. I don't know how much that. I think a little bit, but still, I think it comes down to a general manager says, you know, I got to do my job. If we can get this guy and fit him in the budget, we think he's going to help us win. The fans will forgive us. You know, the fans will forgive us if we win a World Series. They can gripe all they want. But if the GM thinks and puts another World Series out there, you know, they'll love A-Rod pretty quickly if he does that for them. So.
Well, speaking of that, I've been reading the New York papers, and there was a fan poll, would you take A-Rod back? 75% said no. Would that have any effect on Cashman and the Steinbrenners at all? Did they look at those polls and see? I mean, after all, fans are the ones that buy tickets to these ball games.
Yeah, I don't know polls.
And that's an unscientific poll, obviously.
It's an unscientific poll. And Cashman's been at the games for the past few years that A-Rod's been there. So if he's got a sense, I don't know that he would do the polls, but I'm sure he gets an earful from fans, or he's at the park every day, and he kind of gets a feel for that. But I don't know that fans, you know, can be quirky.
Oh, they can.
And you know, if you coach or if you're a GM like that, I've been there as a coach some, and you know, winning cures all evils. So, you know, if you're losing, you can be doing the same thing you're doing when you're winning, and all of a sudden you're an idiot. So, same with your GM job. So, I don't think they let the fans. I think they do. They do what they think is going to help them win, keep their job. And I don't know that the fans are some. And I would say Boston and New York, the fans, you know, do have an effect. So I will give you this. I think that it does, they will consider it. I don't think it's the final factor in any way, shape, or form, but it may have a little bit more effect than it might with Milwaukee or Kansas City or Texas.
Do you think, based on the information that we have today, that A-Rod is absolutely gone from New York? There's no chance he'll come back.
I think he's gone. I won't go as far as to say there's no chance in today's world. I mean, Cashman did say no. So I got to assume that normally when he says something, I would go with it. He's inclined to do that. And I would think the way A-Rod did it, I think he
didn't win friends influence people by doing that.
No, I think Boris left a message on Cashman's answering machine.
He did.
That's what I read. That would be a pretty good sign that they. I would think Cashman. That's one of those. I think that's one of those professional things, and that's a burning bridge deal. And you know, that's one of those kind of stick it to you a little bit deal.
What do you think about the timing? Game 4 of the World Series.
Well, you know, the commissioner has strict rules against that, and again, that's another. Boris is, you know, will be, you know, when you read the polls, well, he's one of the most powerful and influential guys in the game, and so therefore he likes to test the waters and see if he can get away with it and prove that he is, in fact, very powerful.
Do you think there's any chance that in Boris's heart of hearts that he may think perhaps, well, of course he apologized for the breaking into the World Series, but do you think he has any regrets that maybe he should have sat down with the Yankees and heard what they had to say at this point, that maybe he was too hasty?
If it means less dollars, only then would he do that.
Well, of course, my question is this. What would happen, let's say, if, and the Yankees' offer is publicized, what they would have offered, that's been out in the press. Let's say Rodriguez can't get that from any other team. Then what does Boris do? Or what does he do, Rodriguez?
I don't know if he eats crow and comes back or not. I don't know.
Well, obviously to Boris that's inconceivable, that he's going to be able to top that offer from someone else. But it's an interesting, you know, it's like in life, if you paint yourself into a corner, you want to avoid that. You want to always have bridges. You don't want to burn your bridges because you may need to retreat. And it seems to me that this guy is absolutely certain. And maybe he's right. Maybe some.
Well, he's got a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, as far as contacts. And I would say, obviously, he feels like there's a team or two that will do it, or he wouldn't have done it.
So you think before he refused to sit down, he had already gotten feelers that he will get more than that.
Yes. Yeah, that would shock me. For all his positives and negatives, I would say
He's smart.
he usually does his homework.
Mm-hmm. Any predictions, bold predictions of what teams might wind up getting him?
Well, the Dodgers, I think, are in a position where Boris preys on teams that are have money and are desperate, and the Dodgers are desperate. They haven't won a playoff game since 1988. So to me, they would be the prime example. You know, he had a good relationship with Piniella with the Cubs. Cubs are a big market team. They've got a very good third baseman there.
Speaking of the Cubs, let me try this on for size. Read an article and one of the sports writers who said that A-Rod is a perfect fit for the Cubs. The lovable losers, the team that never wins. He can put up these huge numbers with them, but doesn't have the pressure of winning a playoff. Is that just something fun to write about?
Oh, I think it's something fun to write about. I don't necessarily disagree with that, and I think a lot of fans in New York would agree with that. But
well, this writer said he'd be a perfect fit for that reason, that he could put up the huge numbers, he will break the home run record, but he never has to worry about producing in the postseason.
Well, I think the Cub fans are a little tired of losing. I'm not sure about that. I think they're you know, and the Red Sox have put an end to the curse of the Bambino,
Mm-hmm.
which I personally think that Mr. Steinbrenner finally, just the babe up in heaven, said he's had enough of the Yankees being treated the way they were treated, and kind of like, you know, Torrey, I'm sure, you know, kicking an old Yankee out, that he reversed the curse a little bit and put it on the Yankees now. So anyway, the Cub fans have had enough of the Billy Goat and Bart man, and I don't know.
And they've actually been a good ball club. Now, when we were kids, they were second division teams. They were awful, but they've come close. I mean, that's a good baseball team.
Yeah.
They're not the doormats they used to be.
Well, and they didn't spend $300 million every offseason either, like they did last offseason. They paid as much as the Red Sox did and didn't get as far. So, yeah, there's plenty of good players out there. The problem is buying them. Now, the Red Sox, Yankees paid a lot of money, haven't won any World Series. Red Sox have paid a lot of money, about the same amount, maybe a little less, and have won 2 World Series. So then you come down to chemistry, which we've talked about. We've talked about for people who are regular viewers, and I'm sure there's a ton of them out there of our little chit-chats here, that the Yankees put together. And what you mentioned about the Red Sox and A-Rod, if there's a little, you know, that does make a difference with the clubhouse, because the Yankee clubhouse in the late 90s as opposed to the 2000s is a lot different. And, you know, I'd say the guys on the Red Sox are, you know, hard-nosed guys. The Veritex and the Euclides and Lowells and those guys fit together, you know. They're the nucleus, and they've got some character. And they don't...
Sort of like a Brocious and Knobloch
Yeah.
and those guys.
Yeah, Tino Martinez and
And
O'Neill.
Martinez, right.
They don't. When they're down 3-1, there's not panic time. You know, I mean, they're professionals. They may not be Hall of Famers,
Right.
but they play in that. You know, and the Yankees of the 2000s seem to be A-Rod's, Giambi's, Mussina's. Let's just go get Randy Johnson's. I mean, you know, hey, this guy beat us in the World Series. Let's get him. You know, and not much thought to putting together how does this guy fit in the clubhouse, and what does it take. So it was just roto baseball as just, well, let's go get the best guy. However he fits in, well, we don't have room for him, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
This guy will help us. And so I appreciate that even the Red Sox spending money, they put together a group of individuals.
They got their money's worth.
Yeah.
And the Yankees didn't.
So it appears.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we go back to a conversation we had after the 2001 World Series. You were there, Game 7, and I remember you saying, you're 2 outs away from defending your World Series title, you end up losing the game. What do? Nothing. And Steinbrenner just freaked out. He panicked. It seems to me that's the real watershed. That's the dividing point. This is when they went out and started this binge buying and reversed everything. then you look at the players now, Jabba Chamberlain, homegrown ball players. Are they going maybe back toward the homegrown that produced Jeter and produced Rivera and produced Bernie Williams and produced Posada? Have they learned their lesson?
Well, again, Cashman started this when he got autonomy a couple years ago in '05 when he, he was kind of a figurehead at times, and so not all the moves that were made by Cashman. Like most GMs, there would be this guy, or Steinbrenner would go with, the scout du jour. Okay, we need this guy. Okay, we'll get him, and Cashman would. So now Brian has gone with, we're going to develop our own. We're not going to trade them all away. Yeah, they are, and I give Brian Cashman a ton of credit because he's like, we're going to start developing our own like we used to. We would trade some guys to get the final parts to put
Like
together.
Wade Boggs, for example.
Dave Justices, guys like that. Put those guys together, but still develop a core of good young ball players. Because why shouldn't the Yankees? They can go out if they can go out in the free agent world. Why shouldn't they be able to draft the best young players, keep them, develop them, and then you got both sources coming in. So there's no reason for them not to do it. And it's just they were just discombobulated from 2000 after the 2001 World Series. It just kind of helter-skelter, and I think that Cashman's done a great job of trying to get everybody back on the same page.
With free agency as it is, do you think it's going to be difficult for any one team to build a dynasty like the Yankees in the late 40s and 50s? I mean, you're here today, gone tomorrow, and this sort of thing. I mean, what I'm saying, you look at the teams that made the playoffs this year. Only one was there last year, and that was the Yankees. I look at the Cardinals. I mean, do you think we've seen the last of the Yankee dynasty?
Well, I read something about Boston having a dynasty the other day. I think it has to be a combination of what I just talked about. I think you have to do a great job with your amateur system, have guys ready to play. It's very difficult to do in today's market. You've got so many, in baseball being like it is, teams have tried to go buy the best players. They can't win. The Red Sox have spent a lot of money, but they've got the right players. But it's still difficult to get back to the playoffs. It's 162 games, and it's a great game. Just the odds of anybody that if you do it right still doesn't guarantee you're going to win.
Right.
So, and that's the thing we talked about the Yankees. They had won 4 or 5 World Series, and the Arizona, it was the 6th of 7 years they've been in the World Series and won 4. That would have been the 5th. That's as close to a dynasty as we've had in baseball in a long time. And so,
and again, you go back to Joe Torre. He gets them in the playoff year after year after year after year, and they ease him out. Compare him to Bobby Cox, who's in year after year after year, and he's still there.
Yeah.
What's the difference I mean, by Steinbrenner's rules, Bobby Cox had been fired a long time ago.
Right. And the Braves are totally opposite. The Braves are a very family-oriented organization, and Bobby Cox has been with them a long time, and he's going to be with them forever. And so, therefore, the playoff thing is what it is. Sometimes in the playoffs, I mean, if you get to the playoffs, sometimes you're the best team and you don't win. That doesn't necessarily, it's not like football where, your offensive line just goes out there and blows them away.
Right.
So sometimes the other team, their pitchers throw good, and you're facing another really good organization. So it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck in the playoffs. Sometimes team can be a little bit better, but sometimes the best team doesn't always win. But that's a totally different situation. And the expectations in Atlanta are much different than they are for the Yankees. So, Atlanta's a Georgia football and NASCAR town, and baseball's okay, but if they're not winning, they don't draw. So people would like to win there, but it's not like Boston and New York and Chicago. It's bulldog football. When it comes time in the fall, the Braves are doing good. That's good, but most of the people in Georgia, they're barking.
Interesting idea. Tony La Russa came back with St. Louis. Were you surprised?
A little bit because of Jocketty. When Jocketty went, and Jocketty and La Russa have always been together, I thought he might test the waters. And
He was rumored to replace Joe Torre at first.
that was just, it's just a rumor. You'd have to say it didn't have much legs. A lot of guys, there's just, newspaper guys get paid to throw an idea out, and sometimes it has some basis, sometimes it's got zero basis.
He supposedly had said at one time he wanted to manage the Yankees, or
Oh, I think everybody would say that. They'd ask, sure, I'd like to manage the Yankees. I mean, the greatest franchise in sports history. Yeah, you would like that. It's like A-Rod. He'd like to play there and be part of the legacy,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I wasn't totally shocked that he came back. He's 63 and probably, might be his last contract. He's working here and he's been in St. Louis a long time. So,
Mm-hmm.
and they hired, the general manager they hired, he may have known that the current guy that they hired has been with the Cardinals for about as long as Tony has. I think he's been there 12 or 13 years, just like La Russa has. So it wasn't somebody new coming in. So he may have known they were going to hire a guy that's been in the Cardinal system that he's familiar with and could work with.
Getting back to Bobby Cox, it seems to me that there's almost a sense of loyalty in the Braves organization. Are there fewer and fewer teams that, I guess what I'm getting at is you would think, and what you had said earlier, Joe Torre has been a faithful servant of George Steinbrenner, World Series championships year after year, but yet they just discard him, or arguably make him a contract they know he's not going to turn down. I mean, is loyalty just gone from so many ball clubs?
No, I don't think so. No, there's clubs. Clubs change. The problem is that it's a really fluid, and general managers change, and they bring in their people, and they get paid to win. So therefore, there's always been movement in baseball. So and nobody wants to say, okay, well, we're building, we got a young team. That'll work for us this year. It probably won't work for us next year. The Brewers, okay, you've had young guys for a couple of years now. Okay, we won some. The owners, everybody's are expecting. Okay, we want our piece of the pie. We want to get to the playoffs. We want to get to the World Series. So, and sometimes people fall by the wayside. It's hard. The Braves are very good at keeping their own people in place, and a lot of that has to do with management saying, understand that you've done a good job, you've had a winning record, you got to the playoffs, and by all accounts, that's a successful season. And if we keep knocking on the door enough, we'll get our World Series titles.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with the Yankees and Torre, I don't know. It was a long marriage, and maybe something had to give. I don't know. They again, the expectations are much greater. You could argue on Steinbrenner's side that he's paying Torre 3 times as much as any other manager, and he would expect what he expects to happen would be a World Series. He hasn't delivered in several years and hasn't been in the World Series in a few years. So
I did read a quote from one of Steinbrenner's sons that never again will the Yankees go from a 1977 to 1996 without a title. And I guess that's the thing about the Yankees with their 26 championships. I can remember hiatuses from 1962 to 1977, no World Series championships. And I guess if you go back, it's the late 40s and 50s is where they really, Yogi Berra has 10 World Series rings? That sort of thing. But again, going back to ball players that when we were kids, Stan Musial, a Cardinal, Ernie Banks, a Cub, Ted Williams, Red Sox, Mickey Mantle, Yankees. Now you get a player like A-Rod, who will be in the Hall of Fame, or Barry Bonds. Look at all the different teams they played for. That's a whole different concept of baseball to me.
Well, it's the way things are today.
Do you think it'll ever go back to the old way?
No, I don't think so. Too much money. It's a money issue, and a team will just say, we can't afford this guy, you know. Happened in Atlanta with Glavine and Maddox. And they would have liked to kept those guys, but the agents said, well, we can, you know, the Mets will pay this much money. And they did. And the player took the money.
But then you get a guy like Derek Jeter, who grew up and wanted to play shortstop for the Yankees, and he is. Could you ever foresee a time when he would be a non-Yankee?
No. No.
So how is he different? And he obviously has an agent, like the rest of them. So how is he different from Alex Rodriguez? They're both superstars, both probably Hall of Fame.
Well, they're different in that, you know, A-Rod was with Seattle and Texas before he became a Yankee. That's a different circumstance. Jeter has always been a Yankee. A-Rod was never accepted as a Yankee by the New York fans when he came.
Why do you suppose that was?
New York fans are very discerning, and I don't know. I don't. I personally would say that they thought he was a fraud and a fake, and tried to be too much. And you know, New Yorkers are probably more like, just tell me like it is, you know. And I think A-Rod, if anything, tried to fit in, and which is the reason he has some sympathy. Well, he didn't say he didn't show a big ego and say, well, I've got to play short. I'm not going to play second fiddle to Jeter.
He moved over.
He moved over. So why don't you love me? You know, it's a little bit like Steinbrenner. Why don't you love me? You know, I mean, I won you all these worlds. So why do you love Jeter and Torrey so much? So I think it's just a little too much. It's just like chasing after the girl too much. You know, so you know. I think that the Yankee fans are like, this guy, something's not right. He's just.
That is the theme of a number of articles I've read, is this whole idea. And of course, after he opted out, there were just page after page of quotes from Rodriguez. I love New York. I want to end my career. In fact, after they clinched the wild card berth, he's in the locker room being interviewed, says, I'll end my career here. I love wearing the pinstripes and all this kind of stuff. And then he opts out. Do you think he was insincere or changed his mind? I mean, what possesses you to say one thing 1 minute and then do the total, and wouldn't even listen to their offer?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I personally never met Alex Rodriguez. Don't know anything. All I'm saying about the fans perceived him as being insincere.
Oh, they did.
The fans perceived him as being insincere, and it was like, I mean, he said all the right things, but again, I think from what you're saying is he said, I want to be a Yankee, I'll do this, I'll do that. Now, whether or not I believe you is based on my experiences with you or people or whatever else in the New York fans. Mm-hmm. Obviously, most of them didn't buy it right away, and now it appears that they were justified in their thing. In their perception of him. But I think it was shocking to a lot of people. It certainly was to me. I would have thought when A-Rod went there that every Yankee fan in the world would be doing backflips. And then all of a sudden you hear about, and I didn't pay that much attention when it first happened. Like I said, fans are fans. I don't, they pay their money, they can cheer and yell, they're fickle, they want to win. That's understandable. I mean, we all do as fans, and when you're a fan of something, you don't care. You don't care about the details much. Just win, baby. You know, Al Davis. So, but with A-Rod, all I can say is he was never accepted, obviously, from that. And then I think he tried so hard to prove in the playoffs that he was a true Yankee.
And he pressed.
Mm-hmm. And when you press, and baseball particularly. In baseball, you really it's a loose game, and a lot of you have to, you can't hit somebody hard like you do in football or jump up and slam it like basketball. It's a game you have to have control of your emotions. You have to. It's intense, but you have to be calm and collected, and things like, what Jeter is. You just have to have it's an aura of confidence, and I've always thought with A-Rod to be as good as he was. He still didn't have the confidence of a Jeter. A Jeter was very sure of who he was. And we're still not sure who A-Rod is, and the fans aren't sure because, just like you said, he said, I want to stay here, I want to do this, and then his agent says something, and boom, Okay, he's on a different, now he's got a different story. So I don't know.
Back to the New York fans. We were in New York in '06, and I saw the A's sweep the Yankees at home. The Yankees hadn't been swept at home in years. The A's did, so I go back Monday night to watch them play the Indians. And the treatment of Alex Rodriguez was unbelievable. One fella came out of the ballpark with a Rodriguez jersey on backwards with a big X through it, and he is spewing expletives about Alex Rodriguez. During the game, there's a Yankee fan 3 seats up behind me, just invective, expletive at this guy, and I'm thinking, this is not some guy from Boston here. This is one of your own ball players. That had to have an effect on him. He knew that. And maybe that was why. But I've never, of course, on the other hand, when he did well, they're all for him. But it's this crazy swing of we love you, we hate you. And that's got to be tough on a human being to deal with that kind of an emotional roller coaster, I would think.
Well, a little bit. But if you're a very good ball player, they all go through it. One of the best quotes I heard, and seeing as I had a little experience last year in Venezuela, in Caracas. As a matter of fact, if I write a book, I got a chapter called "It's a Long Way from Kentucky to Caracas." But the fans if you think New York fans or Philly fans are bad, and this was in the playoffs when Colorado was going to Philly, which has a reputation of fans aren't the best. And he's a 21-year-old Venezuelan, Franklin Morales, and he was starting, I think, game 2, and the sports writers asked him, "Are they worried about the fans?" He goes, "No, I'm not worried about the fans." He said, I pitch in Caracas. They got 2 teams, and we play each other. He goes, the things Phillies fans say aren't even close to what I hear in Venezuela. And I said, I can attest to that. I've been in Caracas, and it is a religion. It's like a combination of Cub and Yankee and Red Sox fans all together, and it's like the World Series every single game they play. It is amazing experience. So, yes, you would be in the back seat with your intensity and love for baseball compared to Venezuela and most Latin American countries.
That's interesting.
Highly, highly intense. It's an experience. Now, there's a lot of guards and guns and stuff there to control people if they want to get out of hand. But I've never seen 10,000 beers go up in the air at the same time on a home run. That's quite an experience.
Yes.
Yeah, at least 10,000. It's out of the corner of your eye, you kind of, guy's a home run, and this team hit it, and I'm not sure what it is. And everybody in that section, beers go up in the air. It's an amazing sight to see that.
Wow.
So it's interesting to watch baseball there.
Getting back to something else you had mentioned earlier, I had on the program recently Josh Stewart, who pitched for the White Sox. Interesting interview. And I guess the thing that fascinates me about baseball is what you said. It is so much a finesse game. And I love any given day, the last place team beats the first place team. Is that part of the mystique of baseball to you? The fact that, again, you've alluded to it. In football, the biggest, meanest, roughest, toughest guy is going to knock you flat every time. In baseball, and I asked Josh, I said, okay, you go out one day, you're unhittable. Your next time, they hit you like a batting practice pitcher. And I asked him the question, how does that happen? His answer was, I don't know. Is that part of the mystique of baseball?
It's part of the mystique, and as a scout, when I go watch a guy, I might see his best performance, or I might see his worst performance. And particularly in amateur ball, when I did amateur ball, it was very hard because now, and what I do now, I see a guy 2 or 3 times. And you can go, okay, I saw good, bad, ugly. Okay, I got to decide, what is he going to be? Now he's got a history.
How do you do that?
He's got a history of, I don't know. Well, it's a lot of years of experience. Different guys do it different ways. There's no set way. And all I can say is, in lieu of the Moneyball thing, where you just go plain stats, you try to see something in the kid, or if you know something about him, or you just watch the way he competes, or if you just have a good feeling this guy's going to get a little bit better in the future, because you just have to go. I know several guys I saw when I was amateur, and I just used my instinct, and he had a bad day, and the rest of the scouts left. I came back. It didn't work every time, but on a couple of guys it did. They were better. I just said, I liked the way it was built. I thought it was going to get bigger and stronger. So much of a young kid is projection on maybe he's just weak, but you like his actions. You say, boy, this guy's, Steve Finley's the best example in the world from Paducah. When he was here in high school, he was lean and a very good athlete. And once he got the strength, he was never a high draft choice of anybody, even at SIU. And part of the deal was he was just kind of a lean kid, a good athlete. And then as he got older, stronger, smarter, and he had great work ethic. He was just an unbelievably worker. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. If you will get a guy that works, so when you do the homework on the guy, baseball's not an easy game. Sometimes the guys that are bad become pretty good because they learn how to play the game. They don't make mistakes. They catch every ground ball. There's maybe guys you see that go, wow, he can really run. He can all the things that God gives them that you look for, but they can't ever put it together. They don't have the aptitude. They don't have the work ethic. So if you had to say, you would go, you would try to see a guy that, work ethic is a given. But some guys just don't panic on the field. You watch them and they're able to handle disappointment, handle failure. Nobody likes to deal with failure. You in your job or anybody in their job, you keep failing and your boss keeps saying, it's hard to come back and do it. It's easy when everybody's patting you on the back. Oh yeah, you did good, great interview, well, yada yada yada. Well, in baseball, and hitting the baseball 3 times out of 10, you make millions. That's 7 out of 10 you fail. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn. The toughest thing I did when I coached was trying to get that through to the players, is that you have to learn from the mistakes, and nobody likes to fail. You can't just keep throwing your helmet and getting mad. Yes, you need to know what you did wrong. If you hit the ball hard, but it's right at somebody, you did all you could do as a hitter. But you didn't have any success. The paper doesn't say the next day you got a hit, you made it out. Okay, you read the paper and you made it out. Well, you may have hit the ball hard. So it takes a very tough, mentally tough individual to play the game, because you keep getting knocked down and come back up. Some people don't do that. I look at myself as a player. When I played, I was a decent player. I wished I wasn't as sensitive. Now as a scout looking back, I said I wished I'd had a harder core and dealt with all the things that happened. So there's so many factors, and yes, that's the allure of the game. Back to your question, yes, the worst team can beat the best team on any given day. The best team doesn't always win. That's why you play 162 games. That's why 7 games is a better than 5 games on mm-hmm. who's the best team. The Red Sox were probably better. But if it had been a 5-game series, boom, Cleveland wins. So the more you stretch it out, the more you got a better chance that the best team's going to win, because mm-hmm. it evens out. But for a short period of time, even a less team could win. Mm-hmm. So personally, for me, and the draw of it is trying to figure it out, because it's extremely difficult mm-hmm. to figure out. You see a guy and you go, as scouts, we talk to each other all the time. We go, we love this job, but the more I do it, you go, this is really difficult. Everybody looks, we're out in Arizona, and I'm watching the top AA, AAA guys. And the top guys are easy, and the guys that aren't so good are easy. Now, there's some guys in the middle. It happens all the time that you think, he's okay. And then in 2 years, he's an all-star, and you're like, we're talking about good scouts. Mm-hmm. And so you try to get a few right along the way, but you're humble. It's very humbling, but it's the same thing as a player. I try to, you try to learn from your mistakes and go, gee, what did I miss? Did I miss anything in this guy? Mm-hmm. Did I not see this? And you're seeing a guy for a small period. He plays 200 games counting spring training. You're seeing for a very small period, and you're trying to extrapolate, project, what is this guy? What if we get him next year? What are we going to have? That's the only thing my boss wants to know. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing he wants to know. What are we going to have if we trade for this guy, if we get this guy? What do we got?
A specific example, undoubtedly, your best signing so far has been Jorge Posada. What was it that made you decide this guy is who we need to sign?
Well, I'd have to be honest and say I didn't think he was going to be this good. Now, he came from a baseball family. He was a shortstop when I saw him.
Now, that was a question I asked you years ago. I ask you again, how in the world can you look at a shortstop and see this guy as an all-star catcher?
Well, the we had he never caught. He didn't run fast enough. He had good actions as a shortstop, had plenty of arm, and my boss said, I don't see him as a shortstop. Maybe a second, third baseman. And he ran pretty good at the time. He might play outfield, but what I did see was switch hitter that could hit. I said he's going to play somewhere. And it just so happened that somebody said, well, in Puerto Rico, he occasionally catches when he goes back home in the summer. So after his college season, he stayed in Alabama, and I knew the coach of this kind of semi-pro team, and I said, would you mind catching him? And he was kind of raw and crude, but he didn't flinch when he caught the ball, and he was crude, but he just had. I thought he had good makeup and work ethic, and he had great makeup and work ethic. I thought he would be a pretty good big leaguer. At the least, I thought, well, he'll be a backup catcher and hit some. And he just exceeded it because he was such a great worker, and his makeup was better than. Well, I thought he had good makeup, but he's got off the chart work ethic, makeup, and he had desire to play and get better. He always wanted to, and it was very intense. And so, you try to identify a guy that's going to be a big leaguer. If he turns out to be great or not, I'm not sure that any guy can say, I saw that. I mean, it's hard enough to say some guy you got in the 20th rounds, if he just gets to the big leagues, you've done a good job. To foresee the future or whatever, I'd be picking stocks on the stock market and be rich. I mean, it's kind of the same deal. You can say that's a pretty good one. I think he's going to be this or that. He may turn out to be a little less. He may turn out to be better.
And of course, now they're comparing him to Bill Dickey, Yogi Berra, Elston Howard, some of the greatest Yankee catchers ever. Do you ever talk to Posada any? I
haven't in a couple of years. I don't have an opportunity to see them in spring training, and since I've left the Yankees, it's been a little while since I've talked to him.
Yeah. So, any insight as to you think he'll sign?
I do. I think he'll sign. I think it means a lot for him to be a Yankee. He's coming off of. This is my speculation. He's just coming off of I think a 4-year, $40 million deal. Now, he's not going and blowing his money. He's got family and kid. So most of that money is somewhere. So my question is, how much more do you need? How much more do you need for your family to be satisfied? And what does it mean? Now you start talking personally, your legacy. Now you start saying, okay, now he's got somewhat, people are talking possible Hall of Fame guy.
Retiring his number, put it out there in the outfield with the rest of them, yeah.
So now do you want that to happen, or do you want to go wherever? I mean, you can't, as you being a big Yankee fan, I mean, what do you want to do? So I really can't see him doing that. I think the Yankees got some money, they'll come up with something. If it's not as much as the Dodgers or whoever else, where he would be I haven't even read about where he might want to go or who might be willing to pay. I would be shocked. Because if, to put his number out there, that's got the money, come on, he's played, he's played, 10 years in the big leagues. He's got to have, there's no telling. He's not blowing his money. He's got enough money to live on for 3 or 4 lifetimes, I would assume. So it can't be money. It might, I don't know that his, some guys' ego, well, I got to make the most money I can. I would think for him it would be, I got a shot at the Hall of Fame. I want to be one of the greatest Yankee catchers of all time. I'd be shocked. Unless the Yankees just make it like Torrey, they just come in and embarrass him with the offer and make him,
And see, that's what I thought Rodriguez, the same thing. He's going to wind up probably breaking the Barry Bonds, the home run record. It's back with the Yankees. Now, here was a quick scenario. I sent an email to Mike Vaccaro, one of the sports writers in New York. He and I have been emailing back and forth. And I said, okay, here's a wild scenario. Comment on it. I'll give you the shot at it. Okay, A-Rod is gone. He will eventually become top home run hitter in Major League Baseball based on what he's done so far. Okay, he goes. The Yankees signed Barry Bonds, bring the home run record back to New York, at least briefly. Is that just too weird for commentary?
No. I mean, Bonds obviously can still hit a few home runs, and it's,
So what I'm saying, he retires in pinstripes. Now, technically, he hits all but a handful of home runs with someone else. I'm trying to think like George Steinbrenner and thinking, because he loves records. Clemens gets that 300 win in a Yankee uniform. So here we have, and again, most of his home runs somebody else, but this guy retires in pinstripes.
I'm not sure how much George is.
I think you're onto something there.
I think the Suns have definitely taken over. I think what you
In an earlier era, would that have happened possibly?
Oh yeah. I think what the Suns are saying is that we are going to run this more. We're going to do it less on emotion. And his sons are not particularly emotional like the dad. They see that there's been some emotional decisions made as far as extending somebody's contract with the money. They're like more physically responsible and looking at it from business guys. From what I've read, what they said, they're pretty much cut and dried with, it's a business decision, here's what we're doing, we're going to run this like a business, and not just like, we got money growing on trees here, we're going to do whatever we want, so what if we throw it away? The Suns seem to be going, no, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. So, and I think when it came out during the playoffs that Steinbrenner said he's not coming back unless we beat the Indians. I think then that the powers that be, George's minions, said this is the worst possible thing. Even Torrey said, how much worse can it be that my players think now they got to win to get me back? Not only do we have, there's playoff pressure bound for everybody, much less the New York Yankees. Now in the middle of the playoffs, for the owner to put that onus on the players is, and I think that's when the Suns, his spokesmen, everybody said, you know what? There's been rumors about his mental condition and his stability.
Mm-hmm.
I think now it's time we go in and take over because it's out of hand. And I think they thought that hurt any chances the Yankees had of doing it by just saying that. I mean, obviously, it's not like Torrey doesn't want to win. Baseball's not like, well, I'm going to go and give these guys a pep talk. We talked about that. That's not the way the game's played. Steinbrenner's from the old school. He was a grad assistant at Northwestern, whatever, or Purdue, whatever
Football
it was.
coach, right.
Football.
And that's a different approach.
It's a different approach. And he thinks they're just not, they're not trying hard enough, so yell at them a little bit. Well, and Torrey's not a yeller. He's played the game. He understands it's a long, drawn-out season. And, guys in the playoffs are definitely going to be given 100%.
And we're out of time. Come back in the spring before the season starts. We'll see how this all turns out. My guest today was Leon Wurth. I'm Berry Craig. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.